Okay, welcome everyone. I am Melissa Stewart, Assistant to the Executive Director of HathiTrust, and welcome to today's presentation on our Emergency Temporary Access Service, ETAS, Usage and Overlap Reports. Note that we throughout the presentation will be referring to the service by its acronym of ETAS. And I'm going to introduce the presenters here. Go ahead, Natalie.
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Fulkerson, Collection Services Librarian.
Jessica?
Hi, I'm Jessica Rohr. I'm the Member Engagement and Communication Specialist.
And Angelina.
And I'm Angelina Zaitsev. I am the User Services Librarian.
All right, so I just got a little bit more housekeeping before we begin. We're asking everyone today to keep your video turned off and to use the chat window. So microphones and video turned off except for those of us that are presenting. And then if you have questions, feel free at any time to type them into the chat window. We do have some HathiTrust staff on hand to answer questions in the chat window, and we will also be reading questions and answering them aloud at the end of the presentation. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jessica to get us started.
Great, thank you, Melissa. So roadmap for today, we're going to be taking a kind of a two-pronged approach to reporting here at HathiTrust. First, we're going to do a high-level overview of HathiTrust reporting, and then we're going to do a deeper dive on the ETAS reports in particular. So we've got the usage reports as well as overlap reports, and we're going to do some also looking at how to use these reports in your own library. So we've left plenty of time for questions. As Melissa said, you can type those into the chat window as we are presenting, and we will read those and answer them to the best of our ability at the end. One request that we do have, though, is we do not have the time to really answer really particular questions about your institution's usage reports. So if you have a specific question about your reports, we ask that you please submit those to the feedback form at the email address that you see here. So that way we can work one-on-one with you and not spend a lot of time in the session today answering those questions. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to Angelina now to give us a sense of general reporting here at HathiTrust.
Thanks, Jessica. So to begin with, I will review HathiTrust's current reporting capabilities and provide some context for the information that we are able to provide. Next slide, please. So we have two methods that allow us to track usage data. The reports that you all received were generated from our application logs. In addition, we use Google Analytics, and we won't go much into the Google Analytics today since most of you do not have access to this tool, but Jessica will dive into the ETAS log reports in more details and talk through how to read them. The overlap reports that Natalie will be talking about are a comparison of your library's collection against the HathiTrust collection. These reports are derived from the print holdings data that your library submitted when joining HathiTrust, and this data may have been updated periodically since then. In addition, a data source that we provide freely on our website to anyone is the Hathi files, which provide bibliographic and administrative details about every single item in the HathiTrust collection. The Hathi files can be used in combination with the overlap and usage reports to understand the contents of the reports in more detail. They also can be analyzed independently to understand what's in the HathiTrust collection, or you can use them to build links to HathiTrust items within your catalogs. Next slide. So there are some things to keep in mind as you work with these reports. We can't easily provide baseline usage information for your institution in order to allow you to assess ETAS usage against regular usage. We recognize that you all have a need for more usage data, and we have been planning and working to scale up our ability to provide usage data in the coming years. The COVID-19 crisis and the launch of ETAS forced us to accelerate our plans to provide usage data, so these reports are not as comprehensive as we ourselves would wish them to be. The log reports that you received only track checkouts of ETAS items. These reports do not track usage of all items by your users. They also do not track search activity, engagement with the books, referral data, etc. In addition, they only go back to when we turned on ETAS for your institution and will only provide data for as long as ETAS is turned on for your institution. Some of you may also have access to our Google Analytics to run your own reports. It's important to know that we have exceeded the data collection limits of the free Google Analytics product that we use, which can result in some sampling issues when running reports. In addition, Google Analytics tracks a completely different type of engagement activity than the ETAS log reports. Regarding the overlap reports, one big limitation here is our reliance on OCLC numbers to match your collection to our collection. The matching process can be fragile and it breaks in cases where our OCLC numbers don't match. Next slide, please. So there's one more thing I want to emphasize about the limits of our ability to collect usage data. HathiTrust is an open access resource. Anyone, anywhere can find and read public domain materials on the HathiTrust website. This means that your users may not have always logged into HathiTrust in the past while using our site. They would only have needed to log in if they wanted to download a book or build a personalized collection. The Emergency Temporary Access Service is the first service we've offered that requires your users to log in order to read and access books on a large scale. If they don't log in with their university accounts, they're only able to discover a more limited set of books that are available to them. What this means for you as you work to understand usage by your users is that we may not have always been able to track all usage by your users. For example, say a user arrives at the HathiTrust website without a clear understanding of what we are. They might conduct a few searches, poke around to see what we have, and then suddenly they discover a book that's critical for their research. Delighted, they try to download a PDF copy of the book. They read the pop-up message that prompts them to log in, and only then, after say 20 minutes of using the HathiTrust website, do they finally log in with their university account. It's only after the moment of login that we're able to align their activity with your university. And it's only after they log in that they're able to find and check out ETAS books. Next slide, please. So we can't provide individual benchmark data for each campus, but we do have some general usage trends that I want to share with you before I turn it over to Jessica. So these numbers are coming from our Google Analytics. Overall, the Emergency Temporary Access Service has resulted in a large increase of usage of the HathiTrust website. Looking at the period that ETAS has been available and comparing against the same time period last year, we see that there has been a 35% increase in the number of users, a 62% increase in the number of sessions, and an 80% increase in the number of page views. And now, Jessica, I am turning it over to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions about what I just covered.
Great, thanks, Angelina. So as Angelina said, we've seen overall usage go up in this time period. And what I'm going to help you do is really look into how the ETAS usage has been going on for you at your institution. So again, it's just a glimpse into how your community uses HathiTrust and specifically how they've been using temporary access titles during the COVID emergency. So first, I have to give a shout out to all of the member institutions who helped us in the first round of the ETAS usage reporting process. The individuals here, we've got Renata and Catherine. I know a few of them are actually on this call. I think Anne and Bernica at University of Pittsburgh. The institutions here provided some excellent feedback on a very early round, and we were able to then adjust and recalibrate and provide you all with what you have today. So thank you for your help in this. So the ETAS reporting process kicked off last week. I the ETAS contact at your institution, and this person was named when you first activated the service, they would have received an email with a link to a dedicated box folder. This box folder is exclusively for your institution, and the link goes to a folder in which we have your ETAS usage reports. So the items that are in that folder are 2 ETAS usage reports, one specifically for usage, and the other one is specific to items. And then the third report is the overlap report. So every week, your ETAS contact will receive this email with this link, and in that folder, they will find these different reports, and they will be accruing. So by that, I mean there won't be a report that's replaced on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis. You will see them accrue likely in chronological order, though I can't confirm that at this moment. We are just in the first week. So you'll see that the ETAS reports are weekly on Wednesdays, and then the overlap report, they come out the third week of each month. So that's kind of a high level look at what to expect here going forward. Now, the reports that you receive for usage, as Angelina mentioned, are from the time of your service activation through the previous week. So when you, or if you do discontinue the ETAS service on your campus, that will be obviously the end of your reporting cycle. So I want to take a deeper dive into the usage report itself. So this is the first of 2 ETAS usage reports. Natalie is going to talk about the overlap report separately. But I want to draw your attention to a couple of these columns just to make sure that you understand what you're looking at. There's a lot of numbers flying around in these reports, especially I think for those schools who've had the service longer. It can be a little bit overwhelming to see. So I want to make sure you really know what you're looking at. So column C shows the number of logged in users checking out an item. This is going to vary. I'll show you a usage report overall for all of our institutions here in just a minute. But the first column is showing the number of logged in users who are checking out an item. The next column, column D, shows the number of total renewal occurrences within a 24-hour period. So if you recall, a user may check out an item for a total of 60 minutes. If they're still using that item, that 60-minute period will automatically renew. And so that's what this column is showing you, is how many items actually were renewed, how many renewal occurrences, excuse me. Column E is the number of unique items that were checked out on that given day. So one piece that I want to kind of tell a little story about, because if you really think about it, each day is going to be a little bit of a story on ETAS usage on your campus. But just to illustrate how you can think about this is on May 11th, there were 3 individuals who checked out 4 different items, some or all of which were renewed a total of 8 times. So if you take that approach in looking at your ETAS usage report, you will be able to see kind of on average what the usage is of ETAS at your institution. So as promised, this is just a snapshot. I did this very quickly on the fly before we got on the call because I thought that, many of you may be sitting at home looking at your usage reports going, this doesn't mean anything to me unless it's in context. So the numbers up on the upper left of the screen are the top 5 institutions and their usage as of yesterday, showing the daily report, showing the daily report for yesterday. So you can see 513 unique users for the top institution, 239, 297. And then I would say most of the members, I grabbed this in the lower right, just from the middle. So you may find yourself and your institution somewhere in between that. There are institutions who have single digits. Some institutions have 5 checkouts. Most of the top 20 are in 100 or plus number of checkouts per day. The average is really in this 20, 30 checkouts per day range. So you can find yourself somewhere in there. There is no perfect or right answer. There's a lot of variables at play. We're starting to look into those as well. So I wanted to take a minute here and look at the second of the ETAS usage reports. This is at the item level. And this is where I really also want to say thank you to the institutions that helped us in the earlier stages, because they really said, you know, we want to have as much detail as possible. They have ideas for how they can use these reports in their own library. And so we're providing 29 columns of information, which for some is probably just about right. And for some, it's certainly too much. So this includes everything from title, author, pub date, most of the bib information that you would imagine, but it also includes the date that the checkout occurred. You can see the renewals for that. And if you are interested in learning more about these fields, you can go to the Hathi Files description link on this page. So you will see multiple titles appear, or excuse me, like duplicates. And that's because that item has been checked out a number of different times. So there's a lot of great information here that I'll talk about in a few minutes in terms of how you might be considering using this information. I'm going to turn it over to Natalie now.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Fulkerson, and I'm going to talk for just a couple of minutes about the ETAS overlap reports that are now available to you in your box folders. Just a quick note that this portion of the webcast does not include information about using overlap reports to add links to your local catalogs. We'll be covering that topic in a separate webinar on June 23rd. So be sure to register for that program if you're interested in learning more about how to do that. Next slide, please. So as Angelina mentioned earlier, we generate overlap reports using our print holdings system, which contains both member print holdings records and information about the contents of our digital collection. The reports are tab delimited text files, and they can be very large. So they're best manipulated using text processing tools like Python. Matching is done at the OCN level. Note that our current print holding specification does not ask for the fields that we use in our rights determination process, so we can't determine copyright status for any print holdings you report that don't match to our digital collection. And just to note here that more information on how to interpret the report is available on our website at the link shown on this slide. Next slide, please. So here's an excerpt from a recent report. The file name is always the word overlap, followed by the date the report was run, and then your member ID, which is usually your web domain. The reports themselves don't have column headings, so I've added them here in red, just for reference. The OCN or OCLC number field and the local ID field are reported back to you exactly as we received them from you in your print holdings files. The local ID is either your local catalog number or barcode, depending on what you gave us in your print holdings files. In the format column, you'll see either mono for single part monographs, multi for multi-part monographs, or serial for serial items. The values in the access and rights columns come from our rights database, and they reflect normal, or in this case, non-pandemic conditions. So without ETAS, your users would have access in full view only to items associated with the allow OCNs in this report. With ETAS enabled, your users will have access to both the allow and the deny OCLC numbers. And just to note that records with no values in the access and rights fields are for OCNs reported to us in your print holdings that don't match to our digital library. We have no control over your local cataloging practices, so the OCNs that we provide in these reports will either be at the bibliographic level or at the item level, depending on what you gave us in your holdings files. And with that, I'll pass back to Jessica for some more information on working with the reports.
Great. Thanks, Natalie. So we've heard from a lot of members, certainly since we started the ETAS service. The requests for having more information about the reports about usage started to come in. So over time, we've been able to really get a sense of what members want to do with this information. So I've gathered it together a bit here and am going to share kind of just what we've heard from members. So there may be other ideas, and I'll give you a chance to talk about that too. The usage reports themselves obviously can give you an estimate, at least, of ETAS usage on your campus. And when I say estimate, I'm also thinking of those users who might be looking for a particular title, who go to HathiTrust looking for something specifically, but don't find it immediately. So there may be those who are interested in certain titles, but aren't immediately finding it. That said, once you are really looking at these reports, you can identify items that are high usage at your institution. Being able to identify the high use digital items gives you a sense of some trends, whether it's in usage or subject area. So there's ways in which I think people are starting to think of these reports in terms of collection management, in terms of building different areas of their collection, or going back and after the pandemic help us all do some backfill in terms of e-resources. So those are a couple of the use cases that we've heard for these reports. The overlap reports, as Natalie was describing, can be used to link items in your catalog to their digital counterpart in HathiTrust. My colleague Graham will be talking about that in more detail on that upcoming webinar on June 23rd, kind of how to actually do that. In the meantime, the overlap report can help you with some collection decisions. You're able to see what parts of your collection overlap with the current HathiTrust collection. So that may be helpful for certain collection management decisions that you may be facing. You're able to kind of combine these reports too. So there's different ways to slice and dice the data and maybe understand not just the high usage items, but items that are in your print holdings, so in your library, on your shelves, that have a match in HathiTrust, but that aren't being accessed. So there's different ways I could see where you might be using that information, both for collection management, but another way to think of it too is if there's a whole subject area that isn't being used, it could indicate that that community in your library isn't aware that they can access temporary titles, temporary access titles from your library. So it could be an indication that maybe one of your liaison librarians could reach out and say, hey, philosophy department, did you know that you can access these temporary access titles? So just some ways that you might use these reports in both the short term and longer term. Giving you also here just a couple refresher links to where you can find more information on our website. There's also a collaborative Google Doc that I've created. So if you have ideas for how you're going to use these reports or some suggestions for how people can manage the data, as Natalie suggested with the overlap reports, you really do need some fairly heavy text processing tools. So that may be less familiar to other people. And if you have tips for using those tools or how you might be rearranging the data to tell different stories or understand something about your collection, that could be really valuable information to your colleagues here in HathiTrust and your fellow members. So I invite you to share those details, share the stories there, share your tips and tricks, and then we can continue to tell the story about ETAS for all of our campuses. So with that, we're going to turn it over to all of you to ask any questions of any of us here.
All right, Jessica, I have one question for you. Just to confirm, unique and renewals are exclusive of one another. There is no overlap in those figures, correct?
Unique and renewal exclusive. The So the unique shows the number of users and who checked out an item. And that's true. The renewals then show the actual occurrences of renewals. So for example, say 3 users who you would see indicated in that unique column, they could, one person there, one of those logged in users could have renewed one item 8 different times. So it is not one-to-one there, if that answers your question. So the renewals are the actual occurrences, not tied to an item. It's actually the number of times that a renewal occurred.
I have a question about the item report. What does it mean when we see renewals for a title when that title has no checkouts for that day?
Oh, that's a cool one. That is related to kind of how our time clock is set up. So if you see, for example, no checkouts, but 1 renewal and 1 item checked out, that is actually showing that the item was checked out the previous day, and then the renewal occurred kind of over the midnight hour. So we've got folks studying late into the night, and it just happens to be that it kind of flipped the switch at just the right time to make it a little more confusing for you. So if you look at the day, the item before, you'll probably see that previous day showing the actual checkout of that renewed item.
Is it possible for you to tell us how many unique users have logged into HathiTrust from my institution since we turned ETAS on?
Not necessarily. I think that it gets back to what Angelina was saying, in that we don't require login for anyone at your institution. And so there may be individuals on your campus who logged in to download a title in the public domain, for example. Angelina, do you have any more detail on that? I think I've got the answer to that one correct, but maybe you can describe it.
Yeah, so the ETAS usage reports are a subset of your total activity. And I think you'd be able to calculate the totals. And Jessica, I'll come back to you on that one. But to see all activity for all of your users during the time period when ETAS has been turned on, that's something that we would have to pull from the Google Analytics. But it gets complicated because the analytics data does not necessarily align with the usage reports. Is that what you were looking for, Jessica?
That does definitely help. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is a subset. I think it's also helpful to note that we aren't collecting, or at least not really specifically collecting, usage data that we would pass on. So we are not regularly looking at, for example, did this particular login come from a specific IP address? We certainly, like all of you, are really mindful of patron privacy. And so that's not data that we have specifically available.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And keep in mind that about 38% of the HathiTrust collection is in the public domain. And for each institution, users get access to an additional percentage that are available through ETAS. So users are accessing both the public domain materials as well as the ETAS items during their visits.
All right, so another clarification. So if an item had 2 unique users and 1 renewal, it was used for up to 3 hours by 2 users?
So that to me would indicate that, so 2 users logged in and checked out a title, and 1 of those titles was renewed 1 time. So we don't know which title that was, nor which user used that title and had it renewed. It could have been the same user renewing the title 1 time. It could have been, I think that would be the only scenario in that particular use case.
I've seen complaints on Twitter that users were being required to log in numerous times to maintain access to ETAS volumes. If when this happens, does it affect the login data?
So let me respond to the first part of that comment question. So the way that ETAS access works is that a user is able to check out a ETAS item for 60 minutes. At the end of that 60 minutes, if they're still using the book, they're actively flipping pages, navigating back and forth through the book will automatically renew for them. But if they like go away for a while, like say they go have a snack or something like that, and they come back 30 minutes later, their session may have expired and they will be prompted to log in. We have been dealing with a really ordinary, difficult bug that we can't quite figure out, where some users are being logged out of their session before that 60 minutes expires. If you yourself are dealing with users talking about that, please contact us and we'll need to gather some more details to figure out what's going on. If that affects the log data, that I'm not sure. And I think I might need to go back to our main developer for more information about that. Unless, Jessica, you have insight.
I don't know the answer to that question right now, but we can certainly find out. And if Roger is got a quick answer to that one, I think he's on the call and I can't see the chat on my screen. So
no, it doesn't affect the data.
Okay.
Thank you.
If an item is used multiple times, will this item listed multiple times in the item report?
It will. What you'll be able to see in the item level report is if for example, there's a particular title, let's say the biography of James Dean, you could sort by that title and see how many times or on how many different days it was used and checked out. And then you'll also be able to see how many times on that day it was renewed. So you'll get a sense, I think, through that item report, kind of the usage of that particular item.
Why would a PDUS title appear on my ETAS item list?
I would respond, is your institution located in Canada?
No, this institution is not located in Canada.
Oh. That's interesting. And I don't have an answer.
I also don't have an answer.
Well, have to...
Great question, though. Apparently, it's a great question, and we don't have the answer right now. But that is something for us to look into more.
We would like to have the usage data separated for individual UC campuses rather than one report for the whole UC system. Yeah,
we have heard that request, and we would love to be able to provide that, but we are not able to provide that. So we have, and Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the way it works is we have the holdings report for the full system. And this is true, I think, for all of our state systems. And so there's a certain level of usage that we're not able to track.
If you're talking about the overlap reports, it depends on the system. Some systems do actually provide their holdings at the individual campus level. UC is one of those, but not all of our campuses are doing that. So, or rather, not all of our members are doing that. So for overlap reports and how those work, it depends on the particular member, and if there are specific questions, we could try to address those through the feedback process. I can't speak to how that works at all for the usage reports. Sorry, I don't have that information.
So that's probably, again, something that we can take up separately. I know that's definitely a question that has come through from a number of the different UC campuses, and I seem to have not had the best answer yet. So let's take that up kind of separate from the session here, and I really hope to be able to get you a really good answer. Thank you.
And just a comment on the PDUS issue. There's now, looks like it was mostly cereals, and we had another member say that I've seen where multiple holdings have limited and PD items depending on binding. So maybe that is our answer to that. Next question, just to make sure I understand the unique user metric. If user A logs in on 3 different days, this person is counted as a unique user on each of those days, even though they are a repeat user. Is this correct?
That is correct.
Right. Go into here for Natalie, how does matching access work for serials and for multi-part monographs?
This is a good question. We've seen it before in a couple of contexts. So for multi-part monographs, we are parsing enumeration and chronology information, both in your print holdings files that you submitted to us and in the bibliographic records that we have for those items when they appear in the HathiTrust digital library. So for multi-parts, checkout is done at the part level. If you have one part reported in your holdings, you'll have the ability to check that item out for one user. If you're reporting 2 parts in your holdings, then you can check out 2 of those parts simultaneously if they're the same part or if they're different parts, I think. The way that matching works for multi-part monographs is again using the OCLC number with the additional data provided in enumeration and chronology. So for multi-part monographs, we attempt to match at the part level. For serials, we only have information at the title level. So if you've reported any enumeration or chronology or any OCLC number for a particular serial title, and we hold any portion of that serial run in our digital library, we will give you access to all of the items or volumes or issues of that serial that we have. And checkout again is at the serial title level. So if you report to us that you have one copy of that serial run, then you'll have access to one at a time.
Why don't you include the HT catalog URL or item ID in the overlap reports?
This is again something we've been asked about and something that we have struggled to figure out. It has to do with the way that our systems are managing the data that we use to generate these reports. So the catalog URLs are not always persistent. They are persistent the vast majority of the time, but they can change in rare circumstances that have to do with the way that bibliographic records for the items in our digital collection are clustered in our bibliographic management system. If items are moved around between clusters based on new OCLC number information that we might receive for those records, then the previous catalog record number for that item might no longer take you to the item in question. And so we just feel that we would be running the risk of providing information that would become stale over time if we were to give you the catalog record number. And then for the HathiTrust item identifier, or the HTID as we call it, again, because we're clustering based on the OCLC number, especially for serials, some government serials, and in addition for multi-part monographs, we see that there are many, many, many individual items represented on a single OCLC number record or a single catalog record. And so there are cases where we would be trying to provide hundreds potentially of HathiTrust identifier numbers, item identifier numbers on a single record. We've talked about whether we couldn't potentially explode the report so that you get the same OCLC number associated with each of those single item IDs on a separate row. But that has the potential to make these files exponentially larger than they already are, which presents some problems for file transfer and the use of our box service.
Is HathiTrust gathering personal information about users?
I can answer that one. We are able to identify users, like most of you also in terms of circ data. So we could ostensibly go back and find out, but we don't do that. We don't use personal data except where we need to for service maintenance or other kinds of operational tasks. So Angelina, do you have more specifics on that? We link to the privacy policy.
Yeah, I was just going to say that our privacy policy is listed on our website if you want to read more about that.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions at this time.
So if you do find as you go through the reports that you have more questions, specific to your institution, or you just need a refresher on what all the columns mean and how to interpret them, definitely please do submit your request to the feedback form, and we'll be happy to work with you in a more one-on-one kind of way.
We have somebody with a question about Google Analytics. Are we planning to use a non-free version of Google Analytics reporting in the future?
So that is something we've looked into. It's also very hard to get a quote for the non-free Google Analytics because I think Google is used to working with companies that make billions of dollars as opposed to not-for-profit digital libraries. Estimates that I've seen for the non-free version of Google Analytics come to $150,000 per year for the license. So I think we will be investigating alternatives to Google Analytics in the future, as well as considering and trying to finally get the Google Analytics support staff to get a quote back to us. There are a lot of problems. I could go on a tirade about this, about all the problems with using Google Analytics, which is a commercial tool aimed at businesses that try to sell products and maybe not the best tool for a digital library.
I do want to just circle back around. I know we've got a number of UC campuses on the call, and I think if someone wants to just submit a ticket to the feedback form, we can really start digging into how we might be able to get better campus level usage data. I know that's something that's been of interest for quite a while, and especially now that ETAS is really up there in usage, I think for UC campuses in particular. So we can start digging into that and see where we can prioritize that among other activities that we have going on. So.
Alrighty, I'm not seeing anything else coming through the chat. So I think we can go ahead and thank everyone for coming today. Again, please, any more questions that come up, please anytime email feedback@issues.hathitrust.org, and we'd be happy to address those. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay. And for you ETAS contacts out there,